Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer: I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support, such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. A couple of announcements and reminders. First, the response to the shared stories of estranged moms and estranged adult children or reconciled children has been phenomenal. Thank you to those of you who have willingly come on the show to share your personal estrangement and or reconciliation experiences. They've been very well received, and I think that there's power and healing every time we share our stories. It's healing and powerful for those who are listening to those stories to recognize they're not alone and to potentially restore some hope. If it's a potential reconciliation story, but also just in being able to share your story. Every time we tell our stories, we're able to gain different perspectives, different insight. Maybe we see things from a different advantage point than we've ever seen before. And so healing all the way around. And I just am super grateful that you have chosen to have your story shared on the Estranged Heart, and that we've been able to be a part of your healing process. If you are interested in sharing your story on the show, please reach out to schedule a time to connect, and I'll have more information about how to do that in the show notes. But you can do that one of two ways. You can either email me at theestrangedheart.com, or you can contact me through the website and actually just schedule the appointment there directly. There is a calendar, and you can just go in and schedule. You don't ever have to have contact with me directly, if that's easier for you. So the second reminder is the amends letter workshop is coming next weekend. And if you've ever thought about writing an amends letter, wondered why you should even write one, wondered what to include, what to discuss, what to leave out, wondered how to word a letter in a way that is likely to be received well from your estranged adult child, or if you're simply needing a little more support other than what you get through reading books, or others' experiences in writing amends letters through, the different online support groups and things like that. If you're wanting additional support, this workshop might be for you. I do want to say this workshop is limited. I limit it to just a few people. It's not, we don't have 25, 30 attendees, because I like to be actively engaged with those who attend the workshop, meaning I answer questions. I am able to help you explore other options and different ways to word things. People come to the workshop and have draft amends letters that they like to share and get feedback on. And while I'm not able to go into a lot of detail with this, because it's a 2-hour, 3-hour workshop, and there are multiple people there attending and might want the same type of feedback, and I don't know your exact history with your estranged adult child. However, it's very hands-on, very interactive, and I do ask questions about your history with your child so that I can help guide and direct you. If you're wanting more personalized support for something like that and would rather not share in a group setting, I do offer that service, an amends letter writing service where I work directly one-on-one with you in order to help you. I learn about your history, and then we work together to write the amends letter, and then we meet again to walk through that final step and discuss when it might be appropriate to send a letter. So anyway, those are things that will be covered. The first part of what I talked about in this upcoming workshop. The workshop is $125. Again, it will be on Saturday, December the 3rd, starting at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time here in the States. And it's limited to six participants. So because I want to be able to give as much time and attention to each attendee as possible. If you're interested in that workshop, to register, you'll need to email me. Email is theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Okay, on to our quotes for today, and I have two. The first one is, "Gratitude is the godchild of grief," and that is by Stephen Jenkinson. And the second is, "Changing your mind is not a sign of losing integrity. It's often a mark of gaining wisdom. Realizing you were wrong doesn't mean you lack judgment. It means you lacked knowledge. Opinions are what you think today. Growth comes from staying open to revising your views tomorrow." And that is by Adam Grant. So today's episode is a bit different than normal episodes here on The Estranged Heart. And it's because I will be talking directly to the estranged adult children. And I hear from estranged adult children often, not nearly as much as I do from estranged moms and dads, but I do hear from them. And I want you to know that this podcast is also for you. I've been both an estranged adult child and an estranged parent. I've reconciled with my mom, and I have reconciled with my children. So I get both sides of that. In today's episode, I don't normally full-on address estranged adult children, but today's episode is just that. I'm hoping that estranged parents will listen to this episode and gather some pearls of wisdom and maybe some things to ponder on about their own estrangement experience moving forward, and how they might be able to maybe potentially do things a little differently. So I've had an estranged adult child who has reached out and asked me 3 very specific questions. And while this adult child has asked these questions specifically, in one email, I do receive very similar questions often from other estranged adult children. So I just wanted to address these today as best I can. And if you feel that it's helpful to you as an estranged adult child, please let me know. If you feel like you need further explanation or further discussion on these things, let me know that as well. I'm happy to continue to do these episodes that are about you. So that's out there. Feel free to contact me and let me know. So the first question that I received was, how should an estranged child cope with grief over the loss of family when that family was severely physically abusive and reconciliation is not safe? I want to start by saying that number one, I am not an advocate for reconciliation in any way if you are unsafe. And when I say unsafe, now for most parents, they will say, I never, hit my child. I never physically abused my child. And your child may not feel safe because of emotional and mental things. So, for the estranged adult children, if you have been physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually abused, by a parent or by a family member, and your parent has refused to acknowledge that, you are not safe. If they have not dealt with their own shit regarding this, meaning dealt with their own history, their own childhood stuff, their own ways that causes the behaviors that they have today. If they have not dealt with that and have not made amends, you are not safe. You're not safe. And if you are not safe, reconciliation should not happen. We all, to be in healthy relationships, need to feel safe. And that requires trust. And that is what I see the breakdown of in every relationship experience, is a breakdown of trust. And therefore a breakdown of feeling safe. And hence estrangement. So, what do you do to cope with the grief over this? Number one, if you're not already, get yourself in therapy. It is imperative. It is absolutely, utterly imperative that you begin to deal with the pains that you have experienced, either physical pains, mental, emotional, or sexual, or a combination of all four. Or spiritual too. You can throw spirituality in there as well. If you have been abused, there is a level of grieving that has to take place in order for you to be able to move on and begin to have healthy relationships with other people, and potentially down the road, the person who abused you. Now, sometimes it's not safe. Although I do have to say that I believe that those are the minority of estrangement cases, but there are estrangement cases that it is not safe for the adult child to be in relationship with their parent. And you will have to grieve the loss of that parent. You will have to grieve the loss of that parent, as well as the dreams you had as a child of that parent, and what you thought your relationship would look like when you were into adulthood. You will have to grieve the death of your dreams. And that's hard. It's really, really hard when we feel on some level that we are not valued enough for a parent to want to make changes so that they can be in healthy relationship with us. When we feel we're not valuable enough for a parent to look within themselves to see what is working, what hasn't worked, what needs to change, all of those things. It's a pain unlike any other as an estranged adult child. As a child, I don't care how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're 20, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. If you have a parent who has abused you and has not been willing to take responsibility and accountability and a willingness to look within and make significant changes to help rebuild your safety, your trust in them, it hurts. It hurts like a son of a bitch. And you have to feel that. You have to grieve it. What does grieving look like? Grieving looks like all sorts of things. It can look like, we talk about the stages of grief, right? It can look like the pleading, the begging, the anger, the numbing, it can look like a variety of different things. And that's why I suggest counseling. It's a healthy way for you to be able, healthy and safe way for you to be able to feel your feelings, explore them, go through the grief, and know that you're going to be safe and quote unquote held through that process. And until you grieve the loss of your parent and the loss of probably the childhood that you didn't get to have because of the abuse, until you grieve that, you will potentially struggle with any of your relationships as an adult with other people in your life, because you won't trust people. If you can't trust your main primal caregivers in life, as children, it's our parents, right? If you're not able to trust that, that's what sets you up to be able to trust others in relationship as you get older. And so if you're not able to trust that, on some level, you're not able to trust any relationship that you're in as an adult. So it's imperative that you grieve that loss and the abuse, the loss of the childhood that you didn't have, the loss of the parent you didn't have, you don't have. Journal about it and give yourself some grace around that. Allow your feelings to come up and out instead of stuffing them, instead of numbing them, instead of, poo-pooing it. Oh, I need to suck it up and get on with my life and get better. And no, you got to feel it to heal it. It's imperative. And if you want to reach out to me just to write a letter to get the process started, I'm happy to listen. I'm happy to read that letter. And when the time comes and you feel like you might be able to reach out to a parent again, want to reach out to your parent again, you let me know, and I'm happy to help you with that. Because I'm also going to keep you safe. Okay. And let me end that question by saying, I am so sorry. I am so very sorry that you've had to experience what you've had to experience as a child. As a child of any age, as a child of a parent. Question number 2. Do you have any tips for dealing with the guilt that comes with the idea that an adult child has abandoned his or her family? Yes, I have some tips for that. Number 1, I think it's important for you to recognize where is this guilt coming from? Are other people saying, oh, it's your only mother, you only have one set of parents, you only have one mother, you should always, never reject them, you should always be in contact and communication with them? Number 1, you might want to consider the source, and know that we all, including the source of that comment, the person that said that comment, come with our own baggage and our own interpretation of life and have our own perspectives. So while they may be trying to be helpful and meaningful in their comments like that are not helpful. They're not helpful in helping someone to heal, to feel seen, heard, and validated, which is our essential components to healing. So I want you to consider that first. Number 2 is consider your own feelings. why might you be feeling guilt? And this is a great place for therapy. This is when going to therapy can help you to explore that. Because is it something that you were taught as a child? Were you taught as a child to feel guilty over upsetting your mom? To feel guilty over upsetting other family members? Were you taught as a child to feel guilt? Where did you learn that? Because if you're doing this, if you're doing estrangement to keep yourself safe, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, sexually, if you're doing it to keep yourself safe, you should not feel guilt. Now, if you are choosing to estrange just to piss somebody off or as some sort of power control thing, then maybe you might want to feel guilt. I don't know. But that's not been the case with the estranged adult children that I work with. None of them are doing this they're not on a power trip. They're not trying to, prove a point. They're doing it because they don't feel safe. They don't have trust in their parent to listen to them, to see them, to hear them, and to validate them. So if those are your reasons for doing this, for remaining estranged, don't feel guilt. Okay? Again, those are things to be explored through therapy. There are reasons why we feel we have a go-to, to feel guilt, or a go-to feel mad, or a go-to any of those emotions and things like that. There's a reason why we have those. And oftentimes it starts in childhood. So again, another great thing to explore in therapy. Okay. In dealing with my guilt over how I treated my children when they were growing up, I have to allow myself to have those feelings when they come up. Now, do they sometimes come up when I'm at work or, at inopportune times? Yes. And so then I kind of put them off and I deal with them at a later day, or later time, but I'm always dealing with them. I'm not shoving them down and pretending they don't exist. So I feel them. I allow myself to feel it, and I allow myself to talk about it in therapy, and I allow myself to journal about it, because oftentimes when I'm writing things down, it gets out of my head, and the swirling stops, and I'm able to make things make sense in a way. And then it tends to lessen my strong feelings of guilt and things along those lines. So those are some tips there where that is concerned. Those are some of the things that I would suggest. And, to trust that you've made this decision for reasons. And so don't feel guilty about making the choices that you've made if you have valid reasons for making those choices. Okay? Don't. You don't have to feel guilty about that. Okay. Yes, you only have one mother, generally, right? I mean, you only have one birth mother, but anyway, there's lots of other things, adoption things, surrogacy, all these things that come into play. But you only have one mom, you only have one dad, or one set of parents, yes. And would it be ideal to be able to be in relationship with those people in your life? Yes. Do those people hurt when you estrange? Quite possibly, yes. However, we as human beings cannot live our life for someone else. Be that our parent, our spouse, our child, our cousin, our grandparent, our best friend, whomever it is. You must live your life for yourself. You must. You have to. Otherwise, you're not living life. You're not living life. And if you're not living, what's the purpose of being here? You have to live your life on your terms. And you do not need to feel guilty for that. You don't. if someone else is hurting because of what you have, the decisions you have made, if you have done it with loving kindness and you've tried your best to communicate that to them, you've tried to clearly articulate the things that they've done that have harmed you, the things they need to do to change, the things they need to do to make amends. If you've done all of those things, you don't need to feel guilt. You don't. Okay. And number 3, I won't go into a lot of detail on this because of getting down to the wire on this episode. I'll probably need to make a separate episode about this one in general. But the question was, I'd love to hear your take on the contribution of things like sexuality, gender identity, and religion, and how those things play into estrangement. Big topics, massive things. And I find that in a lot of estrangement, these are underlying reasons for estranging. So let's just start with the religious piece. It's kind of like religion and politics, right? The two things you're not supposed to talk about. Yet when you are in a family, you have to talk about them, or they're going to come up. They come up at Thanksgiving, they come up at the holidays, they come up at, election times and things like that. And so here we are. Religion. These are things, there's lots of religious trauma that happens. And our parents, especially the older generations, do not recognize that. They don't recognize that there is a thing called religious trauma because they just did what they were told to do when they were children, and so they grew up and they've been doing life as they've been instructed to do by others all of their life. And it's so they don't understand when their child comes along, and this has happened in my case, where when the kid comes along and begins to question things, right? Because oftentimes when we have just gone on with life without questioning things, we've just gone on because someone's told us to do something, and this is the right way that we do this. This is the way we do it in this family, and we've never questioned anything. We really don't have answers when someone does come along and question things, right? Or we have answers and then we begin to second guess those answers, and then it causes confusion, and then we tend to lash out at people who are questioning those. And so oftentimes it's the kids who are questioning the parents, and parents are used to not being questioned, right? As the manager, like I often talk about on this podcast, is parents need to move from being managers into the role of a consultant in the lives of their adult children. And when these topics come up, that tends to be what they are doing, is they're trying to be the manager and trying to force things instead of being the consultant and allowing you to live your life as you see fit, right? I see religion, I see politics, and I see sexuality, gender identity, all of those things playing big roles in estrangement today. But I will say this, that generally at the root of these surface level things, gender identity, sexuality, religion, politics, if you get beneath that, you get beneath those things, it is generally fear and pain that's at the root. It's almost never solely about all of these topics. And if we take, for instance, sexuality, if you have a 70-year-old mom who has a 40-year-old, 30-year-old child who has come out and said, I think I'm gay, or I am gay, or I am a lesbian, or I am a bisexual, or I am a trans person, Number one, it's could potentially be foreign language to them, and they don't tend to have a lot of knowledge and education around this. So what it elicits in them is fear. And when we fear something, we generally try to push it away. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to deal with it. And so we will get angry and insist on things being our way as a way of trying to control things and making things safe so that we don't have to feel fear. So try to keep that in mind as you're thinking about these things. I will do a separate episode on this because I do think that it is, it's something that estranged parents need to be educated on. And a lot of them have told me they don't understand it. And I spend a good bit of time trying to help them to do that, to understand, to explain, and things like that. So I'll work on, a separate episode to address this in more detail. I think that is all of the main questions that this adult child had. If you are an adult child who has questions along these lines or other lines, and you're like, hey, I'd love to hear Kreed talk more about this or that, feel free to email me. I'm happy to add those to the list. And if you're an estranged adult child and you're currently dealing with some of these things that we've talked about today on the show, and you'd like to talk through them in an interview to be on the podcast, I'm happy to do that as well. Right? And I think that it could be very helpful and beneficial to estranged parents out there. So if it's something that you're willing to entertain, let me know. So this brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent and that you're able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement or reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing the podcast with others, or leaving a positive review, or becoming a financial supporter on anchor.fm or through Buy Me a Coffee. You can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, I do have an online support group for estranged moms and who consider themselves to be spiritual and approach estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and have a desire to do inner self-work and reflection. And you can find out more about us there at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out via email to theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Until next time.